We're back with another Behavior Beast episode. We're still working on Cooper, Heron, and Heward. We are right at the beginning, so we're going to talk a little bit about behaviorism. There are lots of different types of behaviorism, just like there's I was going to say rocks, but there's only like one or two rocks behind me, so that's a bad example. There are lots of different types of behaviorism, so let's focus on the first one. The first one would be what Watson did, right? So that is a stimulus response. So you have an S and an R, and notice I didn't do anything magical, they're just an S and an R. So a stimulus response psychology. If you want to think of stimulus response psychology, the best thing to think about is Pavlov, right? So he was the one that really went to work on the classical conditioning piece, that connection between a stimulus and the response, and how you can, I don't know, what's the term, to replace one stimulus with another one through pairing processes to evoke new responses. In other words, to modify reflexes. Well, Watson comes along, and there's lots of great stories about Watson, including he was voted most handsome professor at his university, which is, I don't know why that's relevant, but it is, just so you have a little bit of context. Anyway, so here's this totally hot guy talking about stimulus response stuff, and he's talking about psychology. And Watson really kind of overdid it. I mean, he really took the idea of stimulus response psychology and applied it across the board. His core argument was that you could basically create or select for any particular type of person that you want, any particular skill set that you want, using a stimulus response procedure, SR, right? So he didn't account for consequences of behaviors, right? That's a totally different type of behaviorism. He focused just on the stimulus and response. So, but that's really not the big picture of what Watson was doing that was important. The more important part about Watson was that he really got this idea of a thoroughgoing science of behavior moving. He wasn't the first one to talk about science of behavior. He wasn't the last. He wasn't the most influential. But he did kind of push it even a little bit further. He wrote this paper called The Psychology as the Behaviorist Views It. And it was a really intense sort of calling out of how the whole field had been for the last 30 years or so. All right, so keep in mind, we're in the early 1900s here. So he was reacting to how the field already was, and he wanted to improve it, make it better, and make it more scientific, and make it more effective, and really, really, really push and hit home on the fact that we can use the principles that have already been discovered in the laboratory to do work in the real world. So Watson, again, then set out about measuring and seeing how organisms, specifically humans, change when you modify these sorts of when you modify their environmental constraints, when you connect different stimuli with other stimuli and you select for new responses, but you do it in this hyper-controlled fashion. Again, he was really, really pushing home this science of behavior and this really heavy focus on being scientific and rigorous and empirical. And you know, we can get into all the fun stuff he did, you know, with his graduate student that he eventually married, Watson and Rayner. They did that little thing, Watson and Rayner did. They did that little thing with little Albert, right? Little thing. Well, it was actually a really big thing with little Albert, but they showed that fear was conditioned. It wasn't innate, right? You can go watch the other videos on that on YouTube. There's plenty of stuff out there, but it was absolutely amazing. And Watson realized the implications behind that and how much we actually learn as an organism and how little we're born with in terms of how we respond to our environment. So I think one of the things that I really like about Watson is about this focus on the environmental experience and how an organism comes to the world prepared to respond to their world. They don't come prepared with how to make something, so to speak, right? I wasn't born knowing how to make houses. I learned that. I wasn't born knowing how to polish cars. I learned that. I wasn't born to do all these different things, but my experiences led me to get to those things and to have that particular experience. So anyway, I think that's enough on Skinner. You know where my brain's going with it. I think that's enough on Watson right now. We're going to come back and talk about methodological behaviorism and Skinner's radical behaviorism in a little bit. So hope you don't forget to subscribe and give us some food, because that's how we get our food, is through your subscriptions. And we really appreciate your time. So come back, watch another video. Take care. Bye.